Woo-hoo-hoo, the Golden Stallion is here for you for a little Star Trek update, Patreon only. And this is going to be we'll see exactly how this works over the next few months, because Discovery Season 1 is now over, and the second season, it's been confirmed, will start filming in April, this coming April 2018. And the show probably won't be ready until beginning of 2019, I would assume, something along those lines. So that's, because of that, how much Star Trek news is there really to talk about? There's new novels coming out, stuff like this. But we'll see what I can make happen. I've already talked to, of course, Stephanie and Ellen. Both of them are totally down with doing more Star Trek stuff. In fact, later on, I may talk about it more, but I did get confirmation that Stephanie's totally on board with it. Actually, she voted for it. So I ran a vote for, what is the next piece of erotic audio theater that everybody wants, because you're going to get the holiday special that was supposed to come out, a couple months ago, but we'll have it in 2018. And then I want to do another erotic audio theater for 2018 as well. And I said, do you want another Sovereign Universe one? And I talked about all this in recent episodes all over the place. Do you want a Star Wars erotic audio theater, or do you want a Star Trek erotic audio theater? And the Star Trek erotic audio theater won across the board. I told Ellen about it, and she was just this is at the hotel room this weekend. She was just ecstatic. She's like, yes. I mean, she literally raises her fists and thought it was so cool. And so she's totally on board with doing that as well. So Stephanie and Ellen will both be a part of that. And I'll talk more about that maybe later if we have time, because I already have half the script done. So because I had a little extra time, and I felt so inspired, to write it. And maybe I'll talk about what's going to be coming with that, because it doesn't need to be a total surprise. I'm really excited for this personally. So anyway, we might talk about that more later. So, okay. But yes, so Stephanie and Ellen are totally down for doing more Star Trek, Star Trek Patreon content where we talk about Star Trek and whatever. And like I said, I wanted to do a top 8 for D Space Nine and Voyager and Enterprise. It's not going to make sense to do one for Discovery, but we'll talk about that more when we talk about the episodes of Star Trek Discovery in this Star Trek update. But anyway, I would love to have Ellen and Stephanie talk about their favorite episodes of D Space Nine and Voyager and maybe Enterprise and all of that. But we'll save that for the future, and maybe we could do one of those a month or something like that, and we can figure all that out. So anyway, in February's Star Trek update, we've got a few things that we're going to cover. We're going to cover Discovery, the last few episodes, and really the first season overall. We'll cover that, and then we are going to talk about the latest novel that just came out, I think, on February 6th. I've already read it, and Drastic Measures is what it's called, and we're going to break down that, because it is pretty, well, to quote Spock, it is fascinating. And we'll probably get into Mirror Broken, because Mirror Broken did end. I didn't realize it ended with issue 5, even though there was Luke Crate had a special issue that was about data. It was kind of data centric for the Mirror universe. And I was going to wait for that, but I don't think that the graphic novel version of that, or the trade paperback version of that, the collected edition, which will have that issue with data, it's not coming out till May. So we might as well talk about it now, and maybe when we wrap stuff up again at some point, we do a Star Trek update with the latest news and what's happening in comics and everything, I could talk about the data-centric issue. But anyway, that's what we've got to get into. Why don't we break right into, because it's going to matter. There's a reason. So I mentioned the novel Drastic Measures that just came out, and it came out right after the last episode, the season finale for Discovery happened. And there's a pretty good reason why I think that happened, or at least there's a reason that it waited until the later episodes of Discovery to get released. So we'll talk about that after we talk about the TV episodes of Discovery. But here it is, folks. Spoiler alerts, ahoy. I mean, they're just, you're going to be inundated with them. So if you don't want to get spoiled about what happens in that novel, I don't think there's anything in it that's a terrible spoiler. It's more of hinting at things, and things that I think already people were guessing and wondering about. Okay. So, don't worry about that. And if you haven't watched the entire first season of Discovery, I mean, what are you waiting for? In fact, quite frankly, like, if you did wait until the first season was over, you're in for a treat, because let's just start talking about it. Let's start talking about season 1 of Discovery in the last few episodes. This is Star Trek Discovery, okay, is really something that, like, this is meant to be binge watched. CBS, I understand why they did what they did. I understand why they needed to test out their monthly numbers and everything, which, by the way, they came out with their quarterly reports, so their monthly numbers for CBS All Access. And with CBS All Access and Showtime, their streaming service of Showtime, which, they control that too. They have a total of 5 million subscribers, which their goal for 2020 was 8 million. And so they're very happy. They apparently are doing, excellent money. There was concerns. Of course, Netflix helped fund Star Trek Discovery because Netflix was involved in its international distribution. But now CBS All Access will be going, I think there's like 4 or 5 other countries it's going to be going to, Canada, among others. Anyway, CBS All Access would appear to be a success. So that's important to bring up. Now, part of the reason that it's a success, I'm sure, is because people were holding on to it to watch, Star Trek Discovery every time that, or every Sunday that it would come out, and maybe watch After Trek, which After Trek has been kind of interesting. I'll say this about After Trek, which is the show that comes after where they interview the guests and everything. I would be surprised if this comes back for a second season, or at least if it comes back, I think it might be different. They might not have Matt Mira hosting it. I could picture it being very different. I don't know. They changed, like when the show came back, After Trek ended up going from, originally it was a live show that they were doing right after the show aired. Then it became a pre-taped show. And so they're already really like tweaking how that after show works out. I wouldn't be surprised if they got rid of it altogether. I also wouldn't be surprised if they just, radically changed it come 2019 when season 2 starts up. But here's the thing, is that Star Trek Discovery, this really is a show meant to be watched. It's a binge watch on a weekend. That is really the way that, because there's no, other than, what is it, Magic to Make the Sanest Man Go Mad or something. I think that was the name of the episode where Harry Mudd with the time traveling and all that. Other than that episode, these episodes really all, none of them like stand alone. Like, they really don't make sense standing alone. They are part of a very big arc, a very big story. Well, 15 episode or whatever story arc. And I don't necessarily mind that. Like, my favorite show of all time, even that I love more than Star Trek, is Babylon 5, and that's a 5-year story arc, right? Even though that show has like plenty of singular moments and great moments that you could kind of watch standalone, especially after you've watched the show. I can't really picture, there's episodes that are good and you want to see what happens, but it's only because you're just like salivating over what's going to happen next. I could never imagine, out of the first season of Discovery, going back and just wanting to watch singular episodes. Like there's no, that holds no appeal. You have to watch the entire first season for anything to make any fucking sense. And to talk about the last few episodes, I will talk about that, because and look, what I'm saying here, I really enjoyed this. In fact, there's parts of the show I fucking love. Like, I love some of my favorite Star Trek moments, honestly, of all time. Okay. In fact, maybe the one episode that I could watch sort of over and over again would maybe be the season finale, which we will talk about that here in a minute. But I get it. This isn't, Star Trek usually, except for like, certain story arcs within Deep Space Nine, Star Trek really doesn't function normally this way, where, you have to like watch an entire string of episodes to get the story and to understand what's going on. Usually a lot of the episodes are very much self-contained. But again, I really don't have an issue with that. I think that, all right, so a few things here. I think CBS hurt the show by forcing people to have to tune in every Sunday. Again, I get why they did it. I just don't agree with them, because that's part of the complaints is people are watching this going, what the fuck is going on? Like, I don't get it, blah, 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 as to where I think it'd be a far more cohesive and enjoyable show if you get to watch it all at once. Now, here's another thing, is that so much happens seemingly in each episode and it all happens so quickly. The flaws this show has, here's the first flaw that this show has, is pacing. Like, it is way too fast-paced. There's way too much going on, way too quickly. You don't even have the chance to breathe, and that's not good. In this case, sometimes that's a good thing if you're watching, I don't know, some kind of action movie or something. That is not good for what's going on here, because there's so many tantalizing things going on. There's so much more you want to see of what's going on. Everything is just happening way, way too fast. Not that what's happening is bad, or that it doesn't make sense, or that or that there's a problem, or that it sucks. I don't think so. I think it's all great, but it's just happening way too fucking fast. The Terran Empire story arc that we get in the second half of the first season, that could have been an entire season on its own, and maybe it should have been. It is ridiculously fucking fast paced, and I'm going to say the second problem that this show has is that it has a bit of an identity crisis. And what I mean by that is not that what happens doesn't make sense, but that in the first half, especially like the first 3 to 4 episodes of Discovery, there are plot lines laid out, or there are potential plot lines. There are, little hints and things going on that just they just completely drop, that they just don't care about, and they throw away, and they don't do anything with it. And it's very weird. Like, it really feels like Brian Fuller wrote like 2-3 episodes, whatever, and then, the rest of the creative team, which I don't think is as good as Brian Fuller, just took over, and, maybe they had some abstracts from Brian Fuller and they tried to make it all happen. The one thing, and here's the big spoiler alert, because, if you didn't see the season finale, like, a huge thing happens at the end. When the Enterprise shows up, the good old NCC 1701 under Captain Pike, when that shows up, they've made it clear that was a new idea. That was not something that was part of the original plot, or path of plot lines for for Discovery. So certainly, just with that statement alone, you're aware that, yes, it's a fact. There's things that Brian Fuller came up with. There's things that everybody else, kind of picked up the ball and ran with. Okay, and so there's kind of 2 Star Trek Discoveries here. Like, we get no explanation. They made such a big deal about all the different labs and experimentation areas and everything that are on board the Discovery, and they talk about, there's the Starfleet officers with black badges. Where the fuck are they? There's just a lot of weird shit that you get laid out in the first 3 to 4 episodes, and then just seem to get totally forgotten about. Stamets being, like hippie Stamets, where, he's saying all this, yeah, free love, man, all that kind of stuff just goes away. And that's kind of a shame, because I thought that was sort of fun, because it played off of his usual hard edge. I don't know. There's stuff that they set up that they didn't keep going with. So, and really those are the only 2 major problems I have with the show. Is that it's way too fast-paced, has a major pacing problem, does not take enough time to explore what's going on. And maybe that has to do with budget. CBS came out, when they were reporting the success of CBS All Access, they said that this was an incredibly expensive show to do. And you can kind of tell, there's episodes where it seems like they ran out of budget. In fact, I still haven't seen the Discovery to my satisfaction. On in the show. Which is kind of amazing, because you think with CGI, you should be able to see the starship a whole fucking hell of a lot. But you never get the chance. Not really. I don't think you get to see it enough. You see Voyager, you saw the Defiant even, or the Enterprise D or whatever. You saw those ships way more than you ever see the Discovery. And I think that that's fucking odd. And maybe it was down to budgetary constraints. I don't know. In fact, I kind of hoped it would have arrived today, though I didn't expect it. Just a quick side note here. So from Eagle Moss, a few months ago, when they announced their Star Trek Discovery line of ships that they were going to put out, they put out these anywhere between 6-inch to 11-inch ships that they offer. I have a few of them. I don't know if I talked about it in the last Star Trek update, but I got the Star Trek Phase 2 version of the Enterprise, which is pretty interesting. Anyway, when they were first announced for pre-order, I instantaneously ordered the Discovery. And I didn't expect it and I thought it was funny, but they said that the shipping date was April 1st. I'm like, that's kind of weird. Don't do that. Don't say April 1st, because that usually isn't good. But anyway, I got, just a couple days ago, I got a email from Eagle Moss, and they said that the Discovery was shipping. And I was like, oh, fantastic. Okay. So I was hoping it would be here today and I could review it and talk about it and maybe share some pictures of it. But it didn't arrive today. Maybe it'll arrive tomorrow, but I want to get the Star Trek update done and out there because I have tons of other content that I need to get out to you. So anyway, yeah, once I get that little model, maybe then I can study it and explore it more. I mean, they even said, like Eagle Moss even said on their website, like the final look of the ship, because they have pictures of the molds that they were putting out there, but they said the final look of this may be different than what you see in the pictures. And like, man, somebody's got to tell that story about the production of this show, because I mean, who knows? Like somebody might be really clever and do shot-by-shot comparisons of Discovery. I wouldn't be surprised if we found out that in like the first few episodes that there are drastic differences from the Discovery we see then to the ones that to the later episodes, because some of the later episodes, CBS ordered more episodes for the season very late in the game, and they had to do reshoots and all this stuff. I wouldn't be surprised if shots of the Discovery may have been changed. I don't know. It's the production of the show was obviously a mess, but what they ended up with was really intriguing stuff, really cool stuff. Like I said, overall, I really enjoyed season 1. Probably one of the best first seasons of any Star Trek show. Any Star Trek show. Next to perhaps, the original series or something. But again, just way too fast paced. I know I keep saying it, but I can't emphasize that enough. That's where they fucked up. The stuff went too quick, because we get this entire Terran Empire story arc, and when we get to the season finale, they end the Klingon war. They end the war with the Klingons, and it's like, whoa, it's all over. Like, we didn't even really see it go on. In fact, frankly, it's hard to even remember everything that happened in the past 5 episodes because it was so fast paced. But anyway, let's talk about the Terran Empire story arc a bit. I really like this. I mean, I love the Mirror Universe. I love it. And Empress, actually she goes by Emperor Philippa Georgiou was so hot, so sexy, especially in the last episode because she ends up, I don't need, you've watched it. I don't need to tell you the story. Okay. She ends up, being not kidnapped, but brought to the Prime Universe by Michael Burnham, and by the Discovery crew. And she ends up helping, Starfleet try and win the war against the Klingons by pretty much, copying Wing Commander 3 and how the Terran Confederation would destroy put an end to the war with the Kilrathi. They more or less drop a bomb in the middle of Kronos. And so, and you better believe that's going to be some kind of plot line later, some plot point later, that there's a bomb that could destroy the Klingon homeworld. I don't know when that's going to be used, but I bet it will. Anyway, when they meet up at the Orions and everything, and Emperor Georgiou in the Prime Universe is like, oh, I knew this universe couldn't be all boring, and she ends up having a threesome. That was so great. I was like, oh my God, yes. This is why I love the Mirror Universe. And I mean, that was really, that was hot. That was, and especially Michelle Yeoh, please. I don't care how old she is. Oh, fuck yes. Stephanie and I were watching it. We're just like, woo, that was awesome. And the other weird thing, did anybody else notice that the Klingons had 2 streams? Two piss streams? Maybe they have 2 dicks? That was kind of a new thing. I mean, they just kind of like go past that. Again, it's that pacing. But wow. Yeah. So anyway, yeah, the season finale, really brought all that together, but it was just another one where things were happening way too quick. But boy, that was hot. I really, really like that. There was a lot to like throughout the entire Terran Empire little storyline. Of course, Lorca, Mirror Lorca, who we find out is the Lorca that has been the captain of Discovery all this time and was wanting to get back to the Terran Empire to conquer it, blah, 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 and that's why he was into the mycelium drive and everything, or the spore drive. I mean, he's dead. He's gone. Like they make sure that he's gone. Of course, now what everybody's asking is, well, wait a minute. So, but when somebody changes places between the Prime universe and the Mirror universe, the person from the Prime universe ends up usually transfers to the other universe. And so where's Prime Lorca? Well, we might talk about that later. You know, is Prime Lorca still alive? Because Lorca, like Terran Lorca, you know, it shows up like about 2 years previous to season 1 of Discovery. So what would that be? 22? Would that be like 2257? I think when Mirror Lorca would appear in the Prime universe and kind of take things over. But we'll talk about that more in a minute. So yeah, I really liked what they had going on with you know the Terran Empire story arc, the Klingon War, you know, ending and effectively having L'Rell, you know, having a woman in charge now of the Klingon Empire. All that stuff, dynamite. I think all of that's really cool. What they did with Voq or you know, Ash Tyler, making him, he's probably going to end up being some kind of like ambassador to the Klingons or some shit, whatever. Obviously, you know, when we find out that Ash is actually a Klingon and it's this experimental process, certainly they're looking at Arvin Darvin from Trouble with Tribbles and all that. So, you know, this show, and this is another point to bring up, the amount of like what could be called canon connections, or the amount of time they spend connecting to Enterprise, like mentioning Captain Archer nonstop, connecting to things that happened even in like the original series episode The Cage, connecting to all these different things. I think that's great. Like there's people who are complaining about it, saying that this show spends way too much time trying to connect to canon. No, I don't think that that's a waste of fucking time, because, and in fact, it's annoying that people complain about it, because what were people complaining about before the show even started? Wait a minute, how does this connect to the canon? Is this its own timeline? Blah, blah, blah. They had to go over the top with connecting to canon. They had to, just to try and prove people, even though it's visually distinct and different, you've got to show people, no, this exists within the Prime universe. Yeah, we know it looks more advanced, blah, 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 but we got to be in that. Which leads to the big reveal, or the big surprise ending for the season finale, where they are on their way to Vulcan, okay, and to get their new captain, whoever the fuck that is. In fact, watch it be, I don't know, Prime Lorca or something. But anyway, they're on their way to Vulcan, and they get a distress signal. And, you know, it's like, oh, well, it's encrypted. We can't figure out who it is, but it is a Federation signature. And, of course, it starts to show up, you know, like on one of the screens on the bridge of the Discovery. You start to see NCC, and then it's 17. And as soon as it said 17, I was like, oh, God, it's going to be the Enterprise. And you know, which I was excited for, frankly. And then there it is. It appears, and whoo, you know, you can't help but get excited. Classic music starts playing, the whole thing, especially during the end credits. You know, classic original series Star Trek music. I mean, that was a pretty badass little moment right there. And they say, you know, Captain Pike's commanding, blah, 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 and then the show ends. Now, the Constitution class NCC 1701 does look very different, right? And yeah. So here's where I disagree with the production team of Discovery on this. I think you could have gotten away with it being the very smooth looking Constitution class that has been a part of the enhanced editions of the original series episodes that CBS ordered a few years ago, where they updated the effects and everything. I really think you could have gotten away with that. And especially because the reason I think that works is that, like, when you watch Deep Space Nine and you watch the episode, was it Trials and Tribulations, where they actually do see the Enterprise, it doesn't throw you off when you see it. Like, I don't think that there would have been that stark of a contrast between the two. Also, you know, just In a Mirror Darkly from Enterprise, you totally accepted that that's what, you know, the Constitution class Enterprise looked like, and it didn't throw you off compared to seeing the NX-01 for years. I don't think it would have been a problem if it stood next to the Discovery, because the Discovery looks so fucking weird in the first place. In fact, we still haven't, like I've been saying this whole episode, we haven't really gotten that great look at the Discovery. So I don't understand their way of thinking on this. I don't mind the way that it looks. I don't mind the visual refresh. I don't mind that it has the nacelles that look kind of like the NX-01. But that kind of proves my point, is that you could have gotten away with it looking like the smooth, gray Constitution class that we're used to, or that we're used to now anyway. Because if you're going to borrow design cues from the NX-01, we already had an episode where you could compare the NX, actually, yeah, because you had the Avenger, right? The NX-07, and you had the Enterprise, the ISS Enterprise, the NX-01 in A Mirror Darkly, and it looked fine. So I'm a little skeptical of why they felt they needed to do this. And in fact, I will admit, it's a little worrisome. I mean, you can make the argument that this is just like a design, because Constitution classes have gone through design refreshes, right? Like you have what they call the subclass, which is the Enterprise subclass of the Constitution class, which is what the Enterprise looks like after the motion picture. Yeah, I get it. You can make arguments that it has gone through varying. I mean, and there's other things too. Like, in the Cage, I think it had like the little pointy knobs on the nacelles and everything. Sure. And you could say that, well, eventually, 10 years into the future, because season 1 of Discovery takes place 10 years before the first Kirk episode of the original series. You can say, well, by then it'll look like the smooth thing, right? And that's fine. Like that argument is acceptable. But I am a little worried that they are planning on remaking the original series. Or at least doing like maybe, a couple of years before, like Where No Man Has Gone Before, which is the first episode with Kirk chronologically. And Kirk is already captain of the Enterprise and has been captain of the Enterprise at that point. I'm a little concerned that that's going to be happening. As far as like, are we going to see Spock and all this stuff? Probably. They've made some interesting comments about, are they going to recast Spock and all this stuff? I don't know. It's fine if they do. They can't do any worse than what they did. It was James Frain, whoever the fuck is playing Sarek. I still think that guy is terrible. Like he's horrendous as Sarek. That's another bad part of the show, is the guy they got to play Sarek is not believable at all. Looks ridiculous. In fact, his ears are massive. Like the Vulcan ears that they gave him are fucking huge. What is with that? What happened? It's very odd. They have not done well with Sarek. That easily the weakest character going on. And look, I don't want to be mean to the guy. He's just doing a job, but is it bad? It is fucking bad. With Sarek. And I've felt that way since episode 1. I mean, I've been saying this the whole time, but it's still true. It hasn't gotten any better, and that's really unfortunate. Anyway. So we have the Enterprise. What's going to happen? Are they going to pick up with it in season 2? I mean, we'll see. Now, the novelization, or not, it wasn't Drastic Measures. Desperate Hours was the first novelization that came out back in September 2017. In that, you already have where, not the Discovery, but the Shenzhou, which was, Captain Georgiou's ship, Prime Georgiou, where she has a mission with the Enterprise, and Burnham and Spock go on a mission and everything. And again, it's kind of weird with the comics and novels, because they're not called canon, they're calling them tie-ins, which means they're kind of canon, I guess. They are canon, they actually do matter, but I don't know. They really need to clean up their message on that. But they've been using the word tie-in quite a bit. And I think it does matter, because, and I'll explain why when we start talking about Drastic Measures, because there's big shit that happens, or there's stuff that happens in that they had to have released that on purpose to get you hyped up for future storylines, storylines, to come into future seasons of Discovery. So I don't know how they're going to deal with that. The way that they talked about, and you can listen to past Star Trek updates. You can listen to the one actually for September, if you want to hear my review of Desperate Hours, because what they did with number 1 from Pike's Enterprise, which is what we're experiencing at the end of season 1 of Discovery here, I thought she was just a phenomenal character. I love what they did with the character, and I would love to see that get explored on television. I want to see, I'm more excited to see her, to see number 1, than I am to see Spock or even Pike. I really am. I'm very excited for this. So, but if we even get it, I don't know. We'll have to see what the hell happens. Maybe that's not even like the real Enterprise. I mean, I don't know. So, but bottom line, overall, I thought season 1 was great. It was very good. There are points of greatness, especially in the season finale. But again, too fast, way too fast. Season 2, let's get a fuller season and slow it down, slow it way the fuck down. Because you had, and look, I understand when this kind of thing, maybe you feel like this needs to happen. Like I mentioned Babylon 5 earlier. So with Babylon 5, J. Michael Straczynski had an actual 5-year plan. When it came to season 4, he every season he didn't know if he was going to get a next season. When it came to season 4, at first he was told this is the end. And because he didn't know that TNT would end up buying it out and that he'd get a season 5. And so he had to finish up the Shadow War, and then he had to do the Earth Civil War in season 4. He had to wrap up 2 wars inside of one season. And season 4 is great, but it's crazy fast paced. Now, J. Michael Straczynski is a far better writer than anybody involved with Star Trek Discovery, obviously. And I don't necessarily mean that as an offense to anybody on Star Trek Discovery, but look, you're just not J. Michael Straczynski, and you didn't have that moment of brilliance like Babylon 5 is. But, he pulled it off with season 4, but it was tough. And you do feel the rush, like things happen too fast and blah, blah, blah. But season 1 of Discovery, granted Straczynski had 22 episodes or something for season 4 of Babylon 5. With this, you only had 14, 15 episodes, and that, oh boy, that's tough. So yeah, just again, happened way, way too fast. So, all right, let's talk about Drastic Measures by David Mack, or no, this is by Dayton Ward. David Mack wrote Desperate Hours. We do have there is going to be another Discovery novel coming out in 2018, which I think is great because, again, we're not going to get season 2 until at least 2019, and we don't even know when then. So if you can have stuff for Discovery, like we already have, there's going to be, the Light of Kahless comic has issue 4 to come out, and that'll be wrapped up. We'll review that in the future. And then we have, then there's going to be that Mirror Universe, Discovery comic book miniseries that's going to come out. So there's Discovery stories happening. And again, they are tie-in, which means that they have bearing. They have weight. It's not I've talked about this many times. One of the biggest problems with Star Trek, extraneous Star Trek media, like comics and novels, was that by and large, minus the comic book called Hive, they're like all of it, it's just bullshit. Like it doesn't actually matter. And so like, why bother reading it if it's not actually going to give you insight into the characters? Like what the hell's the point? And, and I agree. I still would read a lot of this stuff, but you just knew it was largely for fun, except for when Simon and Schuster did their reboots. Then they were a little more serious. And like, I've really enjoyed the Enterprise novels, especially because you could kind of count them as like having weight and mattering, especially because there was no other Star Trek movie there, especially at the time. What was it, like 2006 when they did the major reboot of all the Star Trek novel series? At the time, we had no Star Trek movies and we had no Star Trek TV shows, and they, Paramount and CBS were saying, yeah, we're taking a break, until the Abrams verse happened. But even that wouldn't have affected the Simon and Schuster novels. So you could get invested in them because that was the only Star Trek that was out there. So you took it, and I've enjoyed, like the Voyager series of the reboot. And I've enjoyed the hell out of the Enterprise novels, and I still read those. But now, like I say, the Discovery novels and comics actually matter to the story. And I think Drastic Measures drives that point home. And we'll talk about it when we get towards the end of it. But there's really is a lot to talk about here. So this is a prequel. This takes place like 10 years before the Battle of the Binary Stars. Okay, so this is 10 years before the earliest moments of season 1 of Discovery. Okay, and it is a prequel and an extrapolation upon an original series episode from season 1 called Conscience of a King, which has to do with Kodos the Executioner, who is this character. It's actually, I enjoy the episode Conscience of a King because a lot of the best Kirkisms and even the exploration of Kirk as a character, like the depth of Kirk, is totally played out in the episode Conscience of a King, which has to do with, again, the storyline is that Kirk as a boy grew up on this planet Tarsus 4, and on Tarsus 4 there was this tragedy that happened. They don't say much in the original series episode. The book Drastic Measures, which covers this tragedy where this guy, this governor Kodos, kills 4,000 people. Okay, we'll talk about that more in a second. The original series didn't really explain much as to why it happened, but it happened. Okay. And so, but now Kodos, like he got away, and he is, now he's like this play actor and everything. And he's going around as a different, he has a different name. His name's Anton Caridian in it. And, it's, what's interesting is, I love the episode. The story itself is not the most engaging thing in Star Trek history. The cool thing about it is the exploration of Kirk as a character, especially the way he interacts with Caridians, or, Kodos, right? I mean, same guy, with his daughter. And like just some of the sexiest lines in Star Trek history happen in that episode. It's really worth a watch. If you can watch it before or after reading Drastic Measures if you want, but I totally recommend watching it again. Because there's parts of it that are just downright sexy. It is a sexy episode of the original series, for the original series anyway. It's not sexy like the last episode or the season finale of Discovery, but it's sexy. I mean, the whole thing where Caridian's daughter is saying, it's like, calling Kirk a Caesar of the stars and all this stuff. And even William Shatner's classic poetry in it, galaxies may disintegrate, worlds, stars come and go or whatever, but a woman is always a woman. However he says it, I love that line. So Conscience of the King, really cool. But there was really no reason to, I'm surprised that they chose this story of Kirk, what happened to Kirk as a boy on Tarsus 4 with Kodos the Executioner, and the execution of like this 4,000 people on this colony, that they made an entire novel out of it, and they decided to run with it. So this is the story of what happened on Tarsus 4. And Captain Georgiou, of course, she's commander at the time. Commander Georgiou is in it. A Lieutenant Commander Gabriel Lorca, and it is the Prime Lorca, is in it, and those two characters, Georgiou and Lorca, interact with each other, which makes for some interesting play. But of course, it's not the Lorca we experienced in Star Trek Discovery in season 1, because that Lorca is, the Terran Lorca, and I'll explain more about that too in a second. So. What you have is there's this huge expansion. Again, none of this was in the original series episode Conscience of a King, or at least very little of it. There's a speech that Kodos gives in the book Drastic Measures that, you hear parts of that in Conscience of a King, but otherwise, there wasn't a whole lot of explanation of, what exactly happened on Tarsus 4 other than 4,000 people were executed. So this builds out on all of that. Now, the interesting thing is that the overall story here of what happens on Tarsus 4 is there's another planet, another colony, not Tarsus 4, but another colony that something terrible happens there. The Federation has to relocate these refugees from this other colony, humans, and they take them to Tarsus 4. And that's where things get interesting. One could argue, especially with like the Mirror Lorca quotes, make the Empire great again and all this kind of shit that happened in season 1 of Discovery. One can argue that season 1 of Discovery was very much playing off of the political climate of President Trump in the United States today. Well, I'll tell you, Drastic Measures totally plays off of that fact, because it's all about this colony complaining that they had to take in all of these refugees. I think it's really playing off of like the Syrian crisis and, things like this. It's a commentary on that. And how, Kodos, what he eventually ends up having to do is there's not enough food. There's like this disease that starts wiping out the food on Tarsus 4. And they play out Tarsus 4 as if it was a place where like the the colonials there, the people that are populating this colony, they're human, and they wanted to make a colony on Tarsus 4 because they wanted to get back in touch with their humanity, which sort of is in Conscience of a King, is in that episode where, there's like Kodos, and even Kodos's daughter, Caridian's daughter, is saying, Captain, are you human or are you a machine like your starship? So it kind of plays off of that a bit. But anyway, this planet is running out of food, and because of that, Kodos takes over as governor and says, okay, look, we got to wipe out like 4,000 people, and part of it are these refugees, from this other colony that get more or less forcibly relocated by Starfleet, to Tarsus 4, and he has to kill them off so that everybody else can survive. Okay. And there's tragedies that happen. Lorca loses a lover and all this different stuff, and it explores this whole thing. Now, it's admittedly not the most like interesting story. It tries to be interesting, I think, by making political commentary, by being sort of an analogy to, like, say, Syrians or, immigrants and immigration and all that, in how the alt-right feels about that and everything. And they play off a lot of the people in Tarsus 4 as sort of being like the alt-right in a way. And maybe Kodos is sort of a Trumpian character, like they're really, and I think they're a little too heavy-handed in doing so. But overall, what happens in the story, not the most interesting stuff. There's a couple cool things laid out, though. And this is where the Discovery books have done a far better job in doing what I wanted what Star Wars, and yes, I said Star Wars and I mean Star Wars, what I want the Star Wars novels to do. I want the Star Wars novels to literally expand the universe and explain parts of the universe and give us story points or factoids that have a greater bearing on what happens in the galaxy, okay, or in the Star Wars universe, as it were. They never do that. In fact, the novels don't do it until like the Star Wars novels don't do it until like the last chapter. That's when they give you a nugget of info that has some kind of weight for the greater Star Wars story, that has bearing on the greater Star Wars saga. Okay. The Star Trek novels, Star Trek Discovery novels anyway, have done a far better job of this, where you're getting little nuggets here and there and talking about things that are really interesting, that have, that explain away a lot more parts of what has happened within the Star Trek universe. Okay. And Kirk is in this book, and you knew it. Like, I think everybody knew, once they knew that it was going to be about Tarsus 4, they knew that Kirk would have to be in it. Of course, Kirk is a teenager in this. And what's really cool is, like they say in Conscience of the King, Kirk is one of the people that actually saw Kodos and could identify him. And in so doing, like, Kirk makes it his personal mission, and also because a friend who gets murdered in Conscience of the King, you see that his friend Thomas Landry or whatever, who's a scientist, you get that backstory, which is, that's kind of cool. It's amazing to get this much backstory about an episode that most people, I think, don't really care about, and they don't appreciate it for what it actually delivers. And I'll be the first one to say, if I was doing a ranking of greatest original series episodes, Conscience of a King would not be up there. It just wouldn't, even though it does deliver very unique takes and goes to interesting depths, more so than maybe any other episode of Kirk's character. In fact, honestly, Conscience of the King, I think the whole thing that Kirk is a womanizer and that, Kirk gets all the women and all that stuff, I think a lot of that, which isn't true, and there's honest feminist commentators who have done whole write-ups about Kirk saying, no, he's not a womanizer. He's not this, like, that's bullshit. And I agree with them. But I think this is where a lot of that comes from, because of the way that he interacts with, with Kodos / Caridian's daughter. So anyway, Kirk is in this, and he's a very young Kirk. And the way that they play him off is that he wants to, he knows who Kodos is, and he's trying to collect pictures of Kodos, which is something that you end up with in Conscience of the King. And so he's really good at, like, Georgiou interacts with him, Captain Georgiou interacts with him, and he's really good at hacking. Like, he's able to break into computer systems and everything. And that's really cool that they make that the thing about Kirk. They play off that he just has a lot of this natural ability. But what's really great about that is that explains so much of what gets described about Kirk in Star Trek II, which is another major Star Trek presentation that explores Kirk's past. Where, we mention, or where, there's mention of the Kobayashi Maru, where he was able to alter the conditions of the test, right? He hacked the Kobayashi Maru program, or test. Now you understand that that's something he's known for a while. He's learned for a while, and maybe that he was compelled, or just like naturally wanted to, he was intrinsically motivated to get good with computers because he wanted to solve this case with Kodos on Tarsus 4 as a teenager. So it explains that. It explains also why he would have thought of the prefix code to take down the shields on the Reliant and attack Khan in Star Trek II, right? So this is good. This gives us backstory that, yeah, Kirk has actually always been pretty good with computers, and that he has, and like Georgiou even comments and says, wow, he's got way more skill than I do, and I'm no slouch. And I thought that was really awesome. That was a very nice little touch that they ran with. Another interesting factoid that has broad ramifications for the Star Trek universe. There is a Betazoid character who is on board the ship that Commander Georgiou serves aboard. And you find out that only very recently at that point, okay, and this would have been like 2247, something like that, did Betazoid Betazed had not joined the Federation at this point. And they had just recently developed warp drive. Okay. This character, this Betazoid female character in it, she's one of the first ones to ever join Starfleet, one of the first Betazoids to ever do that. And you find out that before Betazed joined the Federation, which they hadn't yet at this time, they didn't tell the Federation that they're telepaths. Like nobody knows that. Like, this character is a telepath, and nobody knows that she is. She keeps it a secret, which is I think that's kind of interesting to explain, because Betazed is one of those planets, kind of like the Deltans, where I want to know more because they seem to be such a free loving, and they're telepathic or whatever, and very sexual society and everything. And you don't get so much of the sexuality in it, even though Discovery clearly doesn't mind going in that direction, but it was cool to get some history about what it was like for Betazed to join the Federation. I thought that was kind of slick, for that to be there. Other tidbits: you find out that Commander Georgiou would end up serving aboard the Defiant, which the Defiant at the time was the Constitution class, and the irony that the Defiant, the USS Defiant, not the one from Deep Space Nine, but the Constitution class Defiant from the original series, which is, kind of the center point of the third season episode, The Tholian Web, which is what ends up leading directly to Enterprise Season 4, In a Mirror Darkly, and how the Terran Empire becomes, and how Empress Hoshi takes over and all this stuff. Which, by the way, there's been some commentary on this that Empress Hoshi and Emperor Georgiou aren't exactly related, but maybe there's something there. Anyway, whatever. By the way, I thought it was so hot when Emperor Georgiou takes over when she becomes captain of the Discovery. I thought that was, I don't know, women with power and in command. I dig it. Same with Empress Hoshi. I thought that, or Empress Sato, whatever you want to call her. I thought that was so fantastic. But of course, she takes command of the Defiant. But there's that interesting synergy that the Defiant is such a major part of the Terran Empire. Which, Emperor Georgiou would be the head of, that Prime Georgiou would also serve aboard the Defiant. I thought that was, again, a lot of these nice little touches that they're putting in that create a really cool continuity that, like I said, Star Wars novels just completely dropped the fucking ball on. It's really sad, and it's pathetic, frankly, for Lucasfilm to be dropping the ball so hard as compared to what Star Trek Discovery is doing as far as having canon connections and having the novels having a point to reading the novels and like really giving some fan service and payoff, which is really enjoyable. So now, speaking of Constitution class ships, they do make an appearance. And in fact, the Enterprise makes an appearance in this. I'll talk about that in a second. They keep talking about the Constitution class ships like, oh, these are the new ships and we got to kind of keep them quiet. So we don't want them, that's why they don't get called in right away to this problem on Tarsus 4. Until later they finally show up. But that, these are, I love the fact that Discovery, be it in the novels or whatever, are really heralding the Constitution class as just being these amazing fucking ships, and these gorgeous ships. And like, there's a point where Georgiou sees the Enterprise in this book, and she says like, oh, that's the future. How incredible is that? And I love that because I still feel a sense of awe when I see a Constitution class ship. I mean, I really do, whether it's the Enterprise or otherwise. So now the Enterprise at this point, again, it's 10 years before season 1 of Discovery. isn't commanded by Captain Pike, because Captain Pike probably isn't a captain yet. In fact, it's commanded, and now maybe this is canon now, depending upon how serious we take the tie-ins, and it would appear we should take it very seriously. We'll mention more about that in a second. It's commanded by Captain Robert April, which has long been theorized, and it's in like the Star Trek Encyclopedia and everything, that he, even though there was never like really an official comment of it, that he is the first captain of the Enterprise, when it was first, commissioned and, put out on the line. I thought that was cool. And in fact, the way that they describe Robert April, what he looks like, first off, this is nice. He's wearing a gray, they say like, it's non-traditional, and he's just kind of an eccentric guy. And he wears a gray cardigan sweater over his uniform. And I thought that was nice because Gene Roddenberry is so well known for wearing a gray cardigan. Now, the pictures that get used, like in the Star Trek Encyclopedia of Captain Robert April, are of Gene Roddenberry wearing an original series uniform. So it just makes sense. And they described him looking like Gene Roddenberry, and even, again, with the gray cardigan, I thought that was really, really perfect, for that to put that together and to have Robert April kind of be canon now and everything. I just thought that was nice. I thought that was really, really cool. A far better thing than what, J.J. Abrams did in his, Kelvin timeline. I thought that was just an awesome, awesome touch. So again, a lot of these little things are what make the book great. It's not so much the storyline itself. Tarsus 4 is a thing. I mean, they're expanding upon something talked about in an original series episode, which I think is a good thing to do. But overall, that's not the most engaging thing. You're just kind of like, you're waiting for, okay, when do we get to meet Kirk? When is this going to happen? When is this going to happen? Blah, blah, blah. What do we get to know about Prime Lorca? Because we know now, when this book comes out, fans know that, well, the Lorca we know is actually a Terran. He's not from the Prime universe. Now there's a point. So the framework of this novel is based around Georgiou reading a book just before the Battle of Binary Stars, pretty much, called The 4000, and it's like this history of what happened on Tarsus 4. And so the author is talking with Captain Georgiou at this point. She's captain of the Shenzhou. And she says, like, yeah, I reached out to Captain Lorca, which he had he was such an integral part of what happened on Tarsus 4. It's a shame he wouldn't get back with me. And what's interesting about that is, like, why didn't Captain Lorca get back with this author about such an important moment in his life? Because at that point in 2257, 10 years later, it's Mirror Lorca, right? It's not, so he wouldn't know about all this. That's why he didn't get back with her. So there's that nice connection to what happens in the show, right? Because at that point it's Mirror Lorca. Then, and this is where things get a little bit more interesting with this book, okay? Because how I experienced this book, I was listening to the audiobook, and the book ends with Kodos, becoming Anton Caridian more or less, and him getting away and everything, and that's the epilogue. Like, it officially says this is the epilogue, and then the music starts playing, and with the audiobook it says this has been Drastic Measures, Star Trek Discovery, narrated by Robert Peikoff, written by Dayton Ward, blah blah blah. And I'm like, wait a minute. Now, so because I read some of the reviews and interviews of Dayton Ward before I finished listening, quote unquote reading the book. And they said that, at the end of the book, there's this really tantalizing thing that happens. And I was waiting for it. And I'm like, and I even went back. Like, I stopped and listened to the epilogue again. I'm like, did I miss something in the epilogue? Like, I was told that there was this really interesting thing that happens. And what I didn't notice was that there is a whole other track at the end of the audiobook. And when that played, it was like a post-credit sequence. And suddenly you're hearing about this guy who is in this, like a prison cell of some kind, and he's talking about how everybody here is, everybody where he is malevolent, they're violent, they're human, but it's very weird. And so obviously, or I think it's obvious, there's hints, there's points at it that it's Prime Lorca and he's in the mirror universe, and it's him and he's in some kind of prison cell, which is probably leading towards in fact, like it's leading towards obviously Prime Lorca coming back at some point, maybe in the show itself. And that's why I say the tie-in novels, I think, really do have bearing, because this is a pretty big thing to bring in. And it's, like I said, it's so odd because, and I even looked on the ebook, because I got the ebook and I looked at it, and they literally put it at the end of fucking everything. Like it's as close as you could get in novel form, or in the novelization medium, to a post-credit sequence. And I don't know how common this is going to become, but I thought it was very odd, especially for the audiobook. It was a bit of a mistake, because on a book, you're going to easily see that, okay, wait, there's more pages, but in audiobook form, when the music starts playing and the Audible app says the book's over, more, or, like it brings up the screen to rate it and everything like it always does, that's very confusing. And then suddenly there's more. I mean, it was cool, like in one sense, but I don't think people are used to that unless, maybe I don't read a whole lot of modern books, fiction books, and this is commonplace now. If it is, I didn't know that, but it was a little jarring. I thought it was fine and cool, but it is a little jarring. But yeah, Prime Lorca is alive. I mean, that's the bottom line that comes out of this book. And that's a pretty big cliffhanger, to end just some simple novelization on. But whatever. Anyway, I thought the book was fine. All those little things that I described were far more interesting than the actual story that more or less rolls out, or at least how the story progresses. What happened on Tarsus 4 and stuff like that. I mean, those are interesting tidbits to know about. But for an entire fucking book, I mean, it could have been a short story, and you could have gotten a lot of all the important stuff, across it. It didn't need to be an entire novel. But I mean, it's not bad. It's just not great. Just like Desperate Hours, a lot of the story wasn't, the story was kind of ho-hum. It was more about the exploration of the timeline of Discovery and of the early Enterprise and things like this, all of which Drastic Measures does as well. But yeah, Prime Lorca's out there. So, Jason Isaacs has a job in the future on Discovery. I'm curious if they're going to mention, this is another area where After Trek, I think, has failed. There have been plenty of comments and points brought up on After Trek about Discovery, about season 1 of Discovery, that the book Desperate Hours answered. And the fact that they wouldn't talk about it, they wouldn't even, just on a marketing perspective, fucking talk about the book on your show, that was just so stupid. I'm curious if After Trek continues in season 2, and if we end up with Prime Lorca, coming into play again, if they're going to mention that, well, in the book Drastic Measures, we got a hint. We knew that this was going to happen. I don't know. I don't know how. I think it would behoove them to do that. It'd be very wise of them to do that, but we'll see. The books are doing the writing room for Discovery, and the authors for the books and comics for Discovery. The synergy that they have is tremendous. It's far better than what's happening in Star Wars, frankly. And because at least, okay, if we got to wait on the book till after the end of the season, at least there's payoff, right? The Prime Lorca scene alone is, that's some really serious payoff. So anyway, now would be a good time to review Mirror Broken, because that is a Mirror Universe, it's the next generation Mirror Universe story. But because we're at the hour mark, I'm gonna wait on that. We'll save it, and maybe I will end up just doing it when the trade paperback comes out at this point. But I will say that it's one of the best Star Trek comic series to ever come out. I'll just say that much. But I can go into deeper points on it in the future. But I loved it. I thought it was so cool. I got the pin. QMX sells the pin for the Terran Empire for the Next Generation. That's how big a deal this was. And we talked about the importance of that in the last Star Trek update, in the January Star Trek update. But anyway, I loved the series. I thought it was so cool, and it's set up to do more, and I hope that they do more. So anyway, okay, so at the end of this, at the end of the Star Trek update, we've got a few minutes. We're at the hour mark, but we've got a few minutes, and I'm going to give you some teasers about the erotic Star Trek audio theater that I'm going to be producing. Like I said, I already have at least Ellen and Stephanie on board for this. I'm sure I can get more, people on board, and I'm sure there's plenty of people in the Patreon audience and the Sovryn Tech audience that would love to be a part of it, and we'll see. But right now, I am planning, what I've written of the story is a very, very tight crew. Okay, so, and it's going to take place in the original series. Like around Discovery. Actually, so the year that I plan on was 2269, which would be, like just past season 3 of the original series. It will be aboard the USS Congo 1710, not 1701 like the Enterprise. And it's going to have to deal with Section 31. And one of the cool points that I wanted to put into it, and I've always wanted to do this, and it's the perfect moment to do it. The only problem is, and maybe I'm sure I have artist friends that could help out with this, because in audio you can't see like the uniforms, right? But I'll make it a point, and I'll find a way to get it included into the audio. Into the audio theater. Again, this is going to be very erotic. Okay. There's just going to be sex everywhere because we need more of that. And yes, we do. Especially in Star Trek. Not that Star Trek is as bad off as Star Wars is when it comes to, a dearth of sex. Star Trek does a hell of a job, including Star Trek Discovery. Woo. But anyway, so this is, so a couple things that I want to address with this. But yeah, Section 31 is going to be in it, and I want to the people involved with Section 31. There's also, the uniforms for Section 31. Like, there's going to be a point where it's a Section 31 team that ends up taking over a Constitution class vessel. Which, when you in This Side of Paradise, the original series episode, This Side of Paradise, they make it very clear that and in Star Trek 3 also, where Scotty says a chimpanzee and 2 trainees could run her, meaning the Enterprise, it's like, well, okay, one person can't run an entire Constitution class ship, but a few people can. It doesn't need to have, the 200 to 400 person crew. And so, yeah, so there'll be, kind of a caper of using a ship, and it being the Congo by Section 31 to do something. I'm not going to reveal who the enemy is, even though I won't reveal that part. I already know who it is. But it's far more. This isn't so much about action. This is far more about a degree of exploration. Okay, because that's what I love about Star Trek, is you get to do exploration in scientific stuff and not all bang 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 action boom boom. That doesn't need to be a part of this. Not so much anyway. So it's going to be exploration slash espionage heavy, this story. And the uniforms, like after the Section 31 team takes over the Congo, they're going to change into their Section 31 uniforms, which I'm pretty much just going to make original. They're going to be original series uniforms, but they're going to be all black, and they'll have like the gold braid for ranking and all that stuff, but they're going to be completely black. And I think I've always wanted to, like, in my wildest dreams, I've always imagined, the short skirt, the mini skirt Starfleet uniform for the ladies, like that in black. It's a little black dress, and the boots. Oh, please. I think that's so hot. So that mental image I finally get to put in audio form. And I think I'm going to have them have like the black cutoff gloves, kind of like the Terran Empire had in Discovery. I thought that was a nice touch. So, that's kind of the flavor. I'm going to make it sexy, obviously. And I'll give you one of the things that I wanted to, or one of the, because like I've been explaining in this entire Star Trek update, I love it when stories, kind of explain things that are a part of the larger universe. And one of the things that I want to explore is the origin of the Vulcan Love Slave Holosuite series that you keep hearing about in Deep Space Nine, and then beyond that even. Because there's like 3 or 4 of them, right? It's such a it's one of the most popular holo novels or holosuite series, that like a Quark's bar and everything. So there's going to be a Vulcan character, at least one in this, and I want to explore maybe where that idea came from, and that maybe like it was something that was based on a kind of a true story. So that's going to be a part of this, and anyway. I'd love to like share half the script with you because I think it's so fucking hot, but it's going to be a lot of fun. But those are some of the just some of the, like, the fun elements that I want to put into it, that I think are really cool. And I'm really glad that actually Star Trek Discovery ended, or the season finale had a threesome in it, like a literal threesome. because then, I can say, hey, Star Trek being sexy is not crazy right now, and I can play off that. So, and Discovery, it's as far as like it being talked about, it's hot right now. So, I got to finish up the holiday special first, and obviously I'll do that. But the Star Trek erotic audio theater that I'm putting together is actually coming together very, very quickly, and I'm really, really happy about that. So anyway, 2018 is going to be a very fun year for Sovryn Tech overall, because this erotic audio theater is a part of Sovryn Tech's DNA, really, and Star Trek has always been a major part of Sovryn Tech. I mean, it they used to be that I would quote it once every episode, and sometimes I still try to do that. Anyway, so this is going to be cool. Everybody's excited about it. Everybody involved is very excited, and I can't wait to get it out there. And I think it's going to be just wildly sexy. So, okay, that's it. There's your Star Trek update for February 2018. I don't know if we're going to do a Star Trek update for March 2018. There will be a Star Trek themed Patreon episode of some kind, but it might not be a Star Trek update. There might not be a Star Trek update until much later into 2018, or maybe even until season 2 of, when season 2 of Discovery comes out. Hopefully we get longer seasons with this too. I mean, really, and they pick stuff up. But at some point I will give a review of my, of the Star Trek Discovery ship model from Eagle Moss. I'll talk about that. And I didn't get to talk about my Star Trek Phase 2 Constitution class. I'll save it for then as well. So maybe I'll get another update in between somewhere here. Maybe when the other Star Trek Discovery novel comes out, which I think it's coming out in June, it's supposedly a lot about Saru, which Saru is really like the shining character in throughout this entire first season. I think the guy's, that's just a brilliant character that I'm glad they allowed to organically grow, because you're way more attached to Saru than I think even Michael Burnham or any other character in the show. Though my favorite I'll leave you with this. My favorite Star Trek Discovery character so far, totally, it's Emperor Giorgio. She is awesome. She is so hot and she's so badass. I love Emperor Giorgio, and I'm glad she's still alive and that we get to most likely explore a lot more stories with her in the future. Really excited about that. So Star Trek's future is looking phenomenal, looking bright, and we got great stuff coming up this year, Star Trek related. Of course, we'll have that full erotic audio theater. Can't wait to put that together. I'm ecstatic about doing this. And it'll be a separate thing. It won't be like a Sovryn Tech Prime episode. So I won't be like constrained to make it 2 hours long. It doesn't, it could just be an hour, and maybe that's all it needs to be. Maybe it'll end up being 2 hours by the time I'm done. But yeah, that's going to be a lot of fun. So there it is, folks. Other content coming out all throughout February 2018. I will see you on the other side.